All right, folks, here we are, NYC Libertarians Podcast, episode 1.0.
Yeah, welcome to the podcast. This is the podcast where we talk about New York City, liberty, the interaction of the two, or the lack thereof.
Lack thereof, that's for sure. So we'll do some introductions. My name's Devin. I'm the chair of the Brooklyn Libertarian Party.
And I'm Ilya, I-L-Y-A, and I'm representative for the Manhattan Libertarian Party.
And we're here to, as Ilya earlier said, talk about liberty politics in New York, talk about some liberty solutions in New York, maybe some liberty problems in New York.
A lot of griping.
There's definitely going to be a lot of griping. There's a lot to gripe about. We're a city of over 8 million people, and we're famous for our griping.
Yeah, we think we have somewhat of a unique take. We're on the vanguard of liberty, so to speak. We're very knowledgeable about what's happening in New York, and we have a lot to critique about it if anyone's willing to listen.
Well, I hope. Yeah, I'm happy that you're so positive about all of these skills that we have. We're going to see. Ilya is the more experienced policy wonk here, and I get to play kind of the charismatic but slightly ignorant. I don't know.
Foil.
Yeah, I get to be your
the straight
foil.
man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not
foil, not tin foil. Big.
Yeah, we're not really the radicals here.
At least not in. Well, we're not going to start talking about the Fed. That's not on the. That's not on the agenda for.
But
today.
in New York City, anyone who's even barely libertarian is a radical. So.
Allegedly, I think that that's what people in the Libertarian Party say, and I think that's one of the reasons why there's kind of this excuse that the Libertarian Party can't be effective here. But I tend to think that New York City is one of the most libertarian cities in the world because people here they really enjoy minding their own business, at least in their personal lives. But I don't think they've figured out how to. We haven't really figured out how to translate that into political policy. Policy
and a lot of them are, most of them aren't active politically. They don't vote. They don't pay attention, and that's perfectly fine. They have their lives. But the problem is that we have to sort of point out that their life is being impacted. A lot of them end up leaving, and people who have to stay here are worse off for it.
Yeah, and I think that we are going to be able to, begin to chart a course that doesn't really exist because New York City is we're a one-party town. The Democratic Party runs the local politics, and they don't operate in a transparent way particularly. And if you want to run as a Democrat, you have to have a very specific set of policies, and you also have to have a very specific set of relationships, and that's just limits competition. And as libertarians in general, or people who enjoy free markets, limited competition means limited success.
Yeah, I'd say the dynamic in New York is in the political sphere is that you have establishment Democrats who can get their communities and special interests in a row, and then they don't have to do much activism. That you have the progressives who make their name on the activism, and they present all these ridiculous bills just to pass the bills and be able to be really proud about them, and they run for these offices that are meaningless except political places, and then you have the Republicans, which are basically a non-entity, and they're not fiscally conservative at all. They're just they don't stand for any kind of principle. It's really just we're not Democrats. Which
would be nice, except they vote. Then they don't have enough power to stop the Democrats, and they don't really have an articulated vision of what an alternative would be. And with their conservative cultural values, they're just really throwing the wrench in the works of actually having like a more progressive libertarian cultural kind of paradigm operating in the city. And I think that's certainly a real shame.
Yeah, so I think there's a real opportunity for libertarians because there's no real voice for liberty, and also New York is very oriented towards activism. So if you have something to say, there's a lot of existing institutions in which to channel that. Often it manifests in really terrible ways, like NIMBYism, like we don't want this development, we're going to sound off on these progressive issues, but if we have enough enterprising people, we can get loud too, and that's nice.
I guess yeah, I guess that's a positive way to look at it. I mean, I think that the language of liberty like doesn't really make sense in New York often, and as people who spend a lot of time in libertarian sphere, the, people talk about liberty all the time and on the Facebook and whatnot and in articles, but here, I think New Yorkers view the concept of liberty as something that happens in the countryside and with guns and whatnot, and they don't realize that what this actually means is, real changes in their lives, like stop and frisk. Like that is a affront to liberty, So ending stopping stop and frisk is a libertarian value and is a big piece of liberty. Decriminalizing drugs, both marijuana on the side of like something that people do recreationally and it's kind of cool, but also we have a heroin epidemic, we have an opioid epidemic in this country and in the city, and decriminalization as a solution, being anti-prohibitionist when it comes to policies, extending to sex work, extending to a lot of the things that even progressives would think is too progressive.
There's a new sex work push in the city that very much sounds libertarian, and we'll talk about that later on in the show. So there is a lot going on. And we want to get into it.
Yeah, because they're honestly, we've got a lot of libertarians in New York City who are in the mainstream media, who are talking about liberty on whatever it is, on Fox or in Reason Magazine. But we don't have a lot, but they do it at a national scale. And so we want to see some more of this conversation happening at a local scale. And that's the promise of the podcast. That's what we want to deliver to you all. And let's get into it. We've got a bit of an agenda, and so I'll let Ilya kick it off.
So I think for our first two topics, we're going to start small, and then we're going to go real big, and then we'll just continue on. So the small, I think, is that we have. This has not been tracked much at all, but the AHA, the American Health Association, or I think that's. Or something like that. Anyway, they've been pushing this bill that Keith Powers, I think, is the councilman who's been pushing it on the Upper East Side. And
this is a New York City bill.
This is a New York City Council.
Yeah.
And they want to mandate that fast food restaurants, their kids menu, have that they in the bundles they can't have soda. They have to have either water or juice. And I just point to this because. We'll talk about this more in terms of like all the stuff that New York City is trying to do with fast food. That fast food is this really this labor market where they're trying to do everything.
It's a highly politicized vector.
Yeah.
For some reason here. I don't know if that's
and also no
same
one
around the country.
But I'm on Twitter. I run our Twitter at libertariaNYC, and I was the only one saying anything about this. No one could think about opposing this.
Well, I have a bit of a theory about why fast food inhabits this kind of strange space, and I think it's because in most of the country, yeah, exactly. In most of the country, everyone has fast food experiences, right? Like fast food is wildly popular. You drive down the street, you're going to see 100 fast food restaurants on your way to work. In New York, if you're living in Manhattan or like gentrified Brooklyn, you almost never see fast food is extremely out of your view, and so really the politicians get to talk about fast food kind of in a way that is completely paternalistic, and it's like it's going to be a thing. Whoops! It's going to be a thing that affects like poor people, and so it's a thing that if you start regulating it and start playing around with it, you have a lot more poor people being impacted than you have rich people or the professional class, and so it's an easy way to have a quote unquote impact without the negative externalities affecting kind of like the gentrified class in the city.
Yeah, and there's. The thing that really got me is that I myself am a Russian immigrant, and my family story is that we had very little money growing up. In fact, we were negative money, and
they call that debt, right?
And the one thing that we could afford, and that my father and I always shared, was that we would buy Coca-Cola and drink it together, and it. Some of my happiest memories of doing that. And it's because my dad never had Coca-Cola in the Soviet Union, and he didn't like Pepsi. So he got to share it with me, and I very much enjoyed it.
He liked the red, though. He liked the red of Coca-Cola. He was like, the blue doesn't really speak to me. The red speaks something.
I'm sure there's some hue that some marketing person has tested it against the USSR flag.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, for me, there were very strict regulations around my sugar intake, and I never developed a taste for the soda stuff.
Yeah, I would never get it with ice though.
Okay.
It was diluted. If it was diluted, it was like a waste of money.
Okay, interesting. Well, and so basically, what they want to do, like New York, like everywhere, we have an obesity problem, particularly in the Bronx. Apparently, people say that the Bronx is one of the most obese counties in the entire country, and so I think this is a classic kind of public health play, right?
Yeah.
To just make sure that the idea is that don't give kids soda. They're not going to drink it. They're not going to be unhealthy. They're not going to get obese. They're not going to have all these health problems. So what's the problem? What's the problem with that?
I mean, I think it's just a matter of respecting individual choice. It's not as if this policy is going to do anything. If the kid wants the soda, the dad is going to buy the soda. And presumably if the dad doesn't have any problem with it, he'll buy the soda.
And that's what Kalo said, right? He said that to you on Twitter. He said something like, we're just trying to make the default option.
Yeah, but if it's
better default option,
if they acknowledge that it's ineffective, then there's just disrespecting choice for no reason.
Well, there is a reason. They want to pass bills because they want to say that they're doing stuff, right? I mean, this is why.
And that's the thing. No one respects choice as a value in itself.
Right. Well, yeah, I hear you. I mean, it's hard for me to get out in support of more soda, but I mean.
I just pointed out
once you start telling restaurants what they have to do, I mean, let's expand the scope. What if they start telling other restaurants?
Well, I'm glad you brought it up, right? Because in general, fast food places are this kind of laboratory of progressive policy in New York City. Mm-hmm. So recently, we had the $15 minimum wage activate, which in the city mostly affects food service, and we had a council bill that mandated vacation time and flex time that you had to have it 2 weeks in advance. So now you can't actually have any flexible arrangements on the fly.
And to the untrained.
And there's and there's a bill right now that they're proposing to make every fast food job a for-cause job, which means you can't fire anyone unless you can prove to a court in theory that this was a valid firing.
Right. And so, all of these things sound nice, right? And this is what we see all the time. And this is what, this is kind of what the broken window fallacy, which not to be confused with the broken window theory, kind of explains, which is that, things that people see are very easy to get support of. It's like, I want all the workers, all the nice folks that serve me at restaurants, they should have vacation time. They should have a higher wage. They should have all these. They should have health insurance. Of course they should. These are all nice things. But then what happens? That's what you see. That's what people can proactively doing. But what about what you don't see, right? And this is where liberty and libertarian politics this is the challenge of libertarian politics, is to explain to folks that what these kind of abstract concepts around, okay, what happens when labor markets aren't flexible, right?
Yeah.
And if you're a business owner, you have a pretty good idea of what happens when labor markets aren't flexible. Every employee that you hire is a much more significant risk, because if things go wrong, then you can't get rid of them. You can get lawsuits that cost a lot of money and take a lot of time. And so what do you do as anyone who manages risk? You hire less people. You're much more careful about hiring people, and probably most kind of nefariously, or not nefariously, but one of the biggest impacts is you won't take risks on people who might have been formerly incarcerated, or might not look the way you think someone should, someone reliable would look. And so you're really impacting people you're impacting a lot of people, and you're particularly impacting people who are marginalized by society already.
Yeah, and in terms of potential employees, if you automate, if you create kiosks, then those people don't even have jobs.
Right, and this is why the tech community is just so excited for government and local government, all these government institutions, to just make things harder for normal businesses, because they are so excited to get you on their apps, doing order in instead of going to the restaurant because it's expensive to hire waiters. buying those food boxes that come to you via the mail, so you can escape restaurants all the way, completely.
Yeah.
Getting you on kiosks, which they're already rolling out, and they also now they have robotic chefs. They're doing robotic hamburgers in San Francisco. So the technology community is more than willing to kind of mitigate.
I mean, I'm mostly concerned it's unstated, and people don't like to acknowledge it, but I'm mostly concerned about the customer experience.
Right.
That McDonald's and other fast food places, they came about, they were well known as a cheap but great quality dining experiences. And so you had this quality of dining experience that was before exclusive to well-to-do people, that was then made accessible. And in New York, with if you're poor, you can have your one, even once a week, because it's so accessible. You can go to McDonald's, you can go to one of these fast food places, and you can just enjoy yourself. You can just be waited on. You can feel like a real person.
Yeah, there was a great article in the Guardian that was pretty impactful a few years ago. And the guy who wrote it, whose name I forget now, because he quit Twitter because Twitter was just so nasty, and he was just getting so upset. But it was all about how McDonald's, fast food in general, but McDonald's restaurants in particular, are the new community center. And that sounds bad to like the progressive mind. That sounds like a travesty to the progressive mind. But like McDonald's perform so many functions for society. Yeah, the food might not be that healthy. It might not be like
in New York. It's like a safe injection site.
In terms of
in
like
the 34th
drugs.
Street McDonald's is basically a safe injection site.
I mean, when I was really active in Occupy Wall Street, like the McDonald's across the street was the bathroom, and it was the service center, and that's just true about how they run the business. Same with Starbucks and their bathroom policies, like these like evil quote unquote corporations that are homogenizing the city and making it less interesting. Deliver real services to real people.
Yeah.
Like every
And it would be
day.
such a shame if, because of all of these policies, the level, the quality, the kind of experience just goes away. And all of these benefits that we had over the last couple of decades just disappears.
But I think, the nice...
And no one's going to care.
Well, the nice progressive
people.
podcast consumers who are going to be listening to this are going to be like, oh, McDonald's is nice. Like, like maybe on the way to the Cape or whatever, I'll stop by the drive-thru. But for actually like for real folks, like this is making life harder for these enterprises. It has real consequences.
Yeah. Anyway. Let's move on from the small to the big. So I wanted to briefly touch on a couple of revelations the past couple of days. So in New York City, we have a lot of big policies that the government just, undertakes, particularly Mayor de Blasio. And there's very little accountability.
He's an activist politician, right? Supposedly.
There's very little accountability. And just profligate spending, and no one cares, apparently. So we have two great examples in the past couple of days that came out. Not that we haven't known about these programs, but it came out because someone actually paid attention.
You mean journalists doing their jobs?
City Council has some hearings and journalists,
Yeah, cool.
So one is ThriveNYC, which is a $250 million a year program. It's 3 years old now, so far there's been about $750 million spent. And Mayor de Blasio appointed his wife to lead this because she's I guess kind of qualified, but if anyone is telling me that it's not a political appointment,
I mean, well, there's a reason why people work really hard to get into politics, and it's so that they can. One of the big benefits is that you get to give amazing jobs with tremendous access and resources to your loved ones. So,
yeah. Anyway, it was billed as a program that would bring mental health to the poor and those who previously were not accessible to the mental health sphere. And it's been criticized by some, to the extent it's been criticized, because it sort of overlooks what some of the most pressing problems among the poor is, which is that those who are violent and those who are most foregone could use mental health services, but this program is not actually oriented to that. It's oriented to bring kind of a middle class level of just regular therapy to the poor. And a lot of the money apparently has been spent on marketing, and
I've certainly seen the marketing.
And they've never instituted any tracking of effectiveness. So they don't track how many people actually show up.
Really, like not even how many
I think
people show
they
up,
might
referrals.
They sort of do, but they don't follow up ever to see if it actually helped anyone. They don't do any tracking in terms of and it's so inexplicable because it's such a like wishy-washy program that you'd think that you would try to get as much data as you can
and
to figure out how it's working.
The best part about giving money to things, in the nonprofit sector and the government sector, is that people will take your money in exchange for data, and that's how reporting, like data reporting in the nonprofit sector works. It's like, okay, we're going to fund you, but like we need you to collect these metrics. That's like period. But anything, as we go through this podcast, there's one issue. There are a few issues I'm going to be a broken record about, but the number one issue that I'm going to be a broken record about is the fact that New York City does not have a 211 system. And if you live anywhere in
What
America,
is a 211 system, Devin?
I'm happy you asked. If you live anywhere in America and have dealt with nonprofit social services anywhere in America, you will know what a 211 system is in general. And that's because a 211 system is like a 311 for the government, like 411 from the past, it's a phone number anyone can call, and they will be connected to a call service representative that has in front of them a giant directory of nonprofit social services in the community. And they will tell you, you can say, oh, I'm on food stamps, but it's not enough, and I've been really sad recently. And they'll say, okay, where do you live? All right, well, this is a nonprofit provided social service, like Thrive, like whatever mental health thing that Thrive is promoting. You can go there. I'll connect you to them. I mean, it's a central directory for nonprofit services. So whether it's homelessness, whether it's mental health issues, any social service that is being funded in New York City, we're missing the first step, which is we don't even have a list of the social services that are available to New Yorkers now. We don't know what the gaps are. If you have these issues, there's probably a service that's close by, but you can't access that information because we're the only big city in the country that doesn't have a nonprofit or a government managing this information referral service. This is the information referral services. And
well,
so
part of the problem with ThriveNYC is actually that it is over a number of agencies, and we can't actually track where that money is spent.
Right, and these are solvable problems. I mean, if you're giving the money, these are extremely solvable problems. If you want to just have a directory of all of the mental health providers in the city, that would be a real benefit. It wouldn't cost that much money. For a few $1,000,000, you could probably be on the phone with these services every month or two, making sure that your information's up to date, building a slick app to enable people to find a service, a mental health service near you. But they don't want to do that. They want to spend hundreds of millions of dollars within their networks to like do cool things that'll get them maybe invited to conferences.
Spend it anywhere. I mean, it doesn't seem like anyone actually cares.
Well,
and it's entirely faith-based.
We have a $85 billion a year budget in the city.
All right, well, let's get to the next thing, which is equally big. The mayor's Renewal program for public schools. So a few years ago, he instituted this program saying that, okay, we have this list of 100 failing schools. And what are we going to do about it? Well, we don't want to close the schools, apparently. So it's, all the bad teachers and all the bad administrators that probably are there, and, we're going to keep them. And
you can't close the schools because of the way the special interests line up. I mean, if you started closing schools, then you have an entire. I mean, this brings us to like there's a certain.
Well, let me get through the.
Okay.
So
Well, I thought I was just supposed to rant right now.
yeah. We want to have a little bit more structure. So, the renewal program is this idea that, okay, we're going to keep the schools, but we're going to put a ton of money into them. And if we put a lot of money into them, then they're going to improve. We can prove that it's the funding that's the real problem, and then things will be good. Apparently, after 3 years or so, around $800 million. The mayor has decided to end the program because because only about a third of the schools have ever left the renewal program, and the others have shown no signs of getting better.
Honestly, I want to applaud him for actually ending a program that's not working. Like that takes some bravery, I guess, right?
Yeah, but I think it's the price that he knew was eventually going to hit the fan, and he's
anyone, if you work in government, very, very few people. I've spent a little time working, in government, mildly, with government, much more so. Very rarely do people say, "Oh, we don't have enough money." Like the people who want more jobs, you know what I mean? People want to keep their jobs, who want to keep the status quo. They're like, "Oh yeah, sure. We need more money for more services." But the people who are there who are trying to do reform, who are trying to actually make these systems work, know that it has much less to do with money and much more to do with a lack of organizational development and a lot of these same things that they're trying to apply to the restaurant industry.
If you give people running a bad school more money, they're gonna waste that money.
Listen, there are scenarios where more money would help a bad school, certainly, but we're ignoring the fact that New York City, New York has a much larger administrative class in our education system than the private school systems do, or like many even other city school systems do. And so, people, particularly on the left, people in the progressive community, they don't want to talk about reform because reform is an admission that things aren't working right, and they just want to say that all we need is more money and things will work better. But that's not the case, and people who work in government know that is not the case. And that what we need to do, and what corporations spend their time doing, they have a difficult time doing. They spend so much money. A lot of these corporations, new and old, spend a huge amount of money on quote unquote innovation, on organizational development, on doing training, on bringing in consultants who actually have the ability to reorganize structures and fire people and reorganize divisions. And that has happened so rarely in government. If you see the scale at which corporate America does that, and they have such a hard time with it, you look at government and they do it so little, you can just get an idea of how calcified these institutions are. And
I wish I could do a hostile takeover of New York City public schools.
Ugh. Well, it didn't. Bloomberg tried, Bloomberg tried. It's gonna happen. The thing is the way these scenarios play out is that if you don't, at a certain point, new systems come in, and this is back to the technology community. The technology community is okay, keep wasting money and screwing things up. At some point, things are gonna be bad enough and they're gonna be inefficient enough where we're going to create a new solution that people haven't seen yet, but education
is just so tightly regulated, they won't let anything develop.
They won't until something breaks.
It's a real shame. It's a real shame the amount of people
I've heard
whose lives are going to be affected.
It's been this way for it's getting worse for 50 years.
It's just
they're gonna come up with pure led, app-based pure led education systems. It's inevitable. It's just how bad is it going to have to be before the market comes in and starts resolving these issues?
I don't know about that. Anyway,
it's going to happen.
Let's move on.
There's no other way. There's nothing. There's
for
no
me.
other option.
For me, this is just another example of no one having any accountability. Everyone just being satisfied once they put the funding in. Once they put the funding in, they can be satisfied. Okay, we're doing something, and they don't actually look to see what the effect of that policy is.
Both things can be true. That is a dynamic, but at a certain point, the technology is effective enough and the demand is high enough to warrant kind of like a getting off this system.
I think the government can do quite a lot to avoid having
They
to
are. I mean, they've been
come
doing
to
it.
account
They've been doing it.
Technology.
They've been doing it. They're going to keep doing it.
Anyway, our next topic is we're going to talk a little about the public advocate and that election that we just had.
One of my favorite positions.
For anyone who is not aware, the public advocate is a specific New York position that was invented because the president of the city council, that position was eliminated in 1989 because of a Supreme Court decision. And the guy who was in that role felt like he wanted another role.
New York, it's a little bit, I mean, some mildly more complicated. I mean, I think that was a good description. But, if you want to Wikipedia some interesting stories, New York City was run by the Board of Estimates before 1989. The Supreme Court ruled that unconstitutional because of one man, one vote issues. And so the Board of Estimates, there's a reason why we have borough presidents. Each borough has a president. Those people used to sit on the Board of Estimates along with the mayor, the comptroller, the president of the city council. You had 8 people basically managing the affairs of this entire city.
Yeah, and city council is ineffectual.
And you can find, and the city council was more like community boards-ish or something. Yeah, it's basically like community boards. And so you can find, actually, it's interesting. You can you can see archival footage of this eight-man, usually man, almost always man, group
Towards
of people.
Towards the end, you had some women.
Yeah, there were some women at the end. Breaking through. Running the city, and it's a crazy prospect. Anyway, so now we have a city council that's population determined. So it follows the Constitution. But we still have borough presidents.
Yeah, the strange thing is that the city council ended up being more powerful than they imagined. Mm-hmm. So they had a bunch of these positions that they kept because they thought that they needed some counterbalance to the mayor, and they didn't realize the city council was going to actually matter. So we have borough presidents who do nothing, and we have this thing called the public advocate that does nothing. It was thought to be this kind of ombudsman role, but no one actually uses it that way.
Ilya says nothing, but I would say, and I think a lot of people would say that there is something valuable about patronage politics. And
right.
I don't like patronage politics personally. I think if we had, what we need is to have much better systems of participatory democracy to replace patronage politics. But how does the system currently work? What do the borough presidents do? Is they work with the community boards, which is kind of the most local form of government. And
they're corrupt and
if you go to a community board meeting, and you will see the problem with community boards very, very quickly, and you probably won't go. I mean, if you make it through the entire 4 hours.
I've been to one.
Oh, I've been too, and it's hard. I think for people of a certain age who have grown
when I went,
4-hour
they
movie,
were asking the police to arrest more delivery guys because of e-bikes.
Right, and there's a reason why that's where community boards are at. I mean, what young person is going to sit through a 4-hour meeting so that they can get maybe 3 minutes of talking done? Yeah, it's just not a thing that our generation is interested in doing. So, but it doesn't have to be so bad. There are a lot of solutions. There are a lot of ways to do local politics better. But I would say that borough presidents, their role is to work with established community organizations, work with the community boards, work with these grassroots structures, and try to deliver them some type of value. And that's what patronage politics, in the positive sense, is supposed to do. And you're shaking your head. I understand what you're shaking your head at.
The community boards, the special interests are where the NIMBYs live. Is where
I'm not saying
it's
good.
Policies.
I'm not saying it's run well.
Anyway, public advocate is useful, definitely useful, because
potentially
it is a citywide position that can basically mouth off about anything.
With
$3.5 million budget, which is relatively small for the city.
You can do quite a bit,
but you can do so. Yeah, creative individuals can do a lot with it. It's a bully pulpit, and it's basically designed as a place for a politician looking to run for mayor, because
it's become that. It was designed poorly.
Anyone
to
would
serve
see. Anyone would see
role.
that it would be that, because you prove if you get elected, you prove that you can win a citywide constituency, right? That's huge.
No, for sure.
Second, you maintain relevancy. There's a ton of, because we don't actually have party politics in this town, there's a ton of people who just jockey to maintain relevancy. And
I mean, for sure. And you have your responsibilities are so strange. The only thing you can do is succeed, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing you can do is be like, yes, I got a thing done. No one's coming to you particularly being like, oh, well, this street here, is this intersection's not working. What are you doing about it? It's like, oh, go to your borough president, go to your community board, go to your council district,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice job. It seems like a really nice job to have.
So we just had a special election for a public advocate. Because Tish James, who was previously the public advocate, became the New York Attorney General. And in my opinion, she owes us $15 million because that's how much public money went into this election.
Well, let's extend. First of all, full disclosure, I ran for public advocate.
But not this past time.
But not this past time. But since 2017, we had 2017 election. Then we just got through with the February 26th special election. Then we're going to have a charter mandated another special election, right? I mean, that's what it is, in November of 2019. And then we're going to get back on the normal cycle with having the fourth public advocate election in 4 years in 2021. And so right now you're saying it cost us $15 million?
Yeah.
What's the next one going to cost us? The next one's going to be a primary and like a real primary political party primary and a real election. There's going to be matching funds again.
Yep.
We're going to look at least another $15 million, probably with less matching funds going out this time around.
I think the matching funds was $7 million
for this
cycle, and so that would mean that there was about like $8-9 million
But we had 17 people
to run the election.
10 of them got
so
matching funds.
And you need 2 of those because it's primary and a general. It gets up there.
I mean, we're probably looking at like $40-ish million.
Yeah, so I think Tish James owes us about $40 million.
I think that seems like a reasonable. And I love how no one is saying like she resigned and that this is at all like her fault. Like she took a job and then decided to get another job. It's only that, oh, isn't it great that she got like the upgrade to state attorney general, which to me is a little bizarre, right? Like, I mean, you applied for a job, you get a job, and then you see an opening and you take the better job, and no one says
it's not unique in New York because the guy who just won is Jumaane Williams, and he is very much indicative, I think, also Tish James, that it's people vote for the person they like and they want to have power, and they don't care where, they just want that person to have as much power as possible.
Yeah, we do somehow. This is where New York City really is not a libertarian place, where we're voting for personalities to kind of show their best judgment with and give them kind of as much power as they possibly can.
Yeah, and there's no concern about institutional role.
Yeah.
It's only like, do I like this person and can I give him more power?
That's a generalization, but I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I hear you. I mean, so this last election, 17 people ran. It was not a party election, so no one could run on a Democrat or Republican party line. Everyone made up their own lines, and it captivated, at least it looked like it captivated the political class. It definitely captivated the political class's imagination. It was the story of the last few weeks, but it definitely did not captivate the public.
No, should we share the numbers, the percentage of people who actually voted?
The percentage.
The turnout was, I think, 8.7%.
Right. Normally it was like 200,000 people. They spent how much money?
I calculated $34.50 per vote.
$34.50 per
Correct.
vote. Like so the city spent $34.50 for every person
to hold the election plus matching funds. That is how much they spent per vote.
Gosh, I don't even want to get into matching funds. So in New York City, if you qualify as a candidate at a certain threshold, if you raise enough money from enough people and a certain set of certain criteria, they will.
No, wait, that's just the debate. Never mind.
They'll give you six times. Is it 8?
It used to be 6-1, and now with the charter revision, is now 8-1.
8. So they'll give you 8 times as much money as you raised, purportedly to level the playing field between like well-funded candidates and not so well-funded candidates. But
yeah, the idea is they lower contribution levels at the same time, so you have more small donors, and those small donors should have larger impact is the theory.
Well, and yeah, and I think, and I look forward to hopefully someone's going to do some studies around the real impacts of here. Because, I mean, as someone who ran as an independent third party style candidate, I mean, the threshold to get matching funds was so high that, I certainly didn't qualify. Third party candidates, like, don't qualify for it. So what it means is that instead of me having, 100 times less than my competitors, I have like 1,000 times less than my competitors. So if you get the matching funds, you get a lot of money. If you don't get the matching funds, then it's like you might as well stop running.
Yeah, and that once a third party does get the matching funds, they're going to shut down the program.
Well, they're going to figure out they're going
to do democracy vouchers or something.
Yeah, well, democracy vouchers at least to me seemed just like a.
Well, it's got constitutional issues.
Yeah, I know. And Seattle did them. I mean, this stuff is just not that easy to solve. The impact of like money and.
Well,
politics.
It's because ultimately it's speech. I don't know. I subscribe to that point of view that if people want to put their money towards political messaging, I don't see why the government is limiting that.
No, I mean I hear you. I mean the problem is you start building up frameworks to prevent people from doing this stuff, and then what happens? The people with the lawyers, the people who can figure out how to game the system, figure out how to game it to their favor anyway.
Yeah.
So once again, the rich and the well financed or rich and well financed would have much more success if we want to reform these systems by like doing things like approval voting, where we can actually begin to kind of play with the math around how people signal their preferences.
All right. Anyway, let's briefly advertise, because we've been talking about the Public Advocate.
Right, and everyone, yeah.
That we are also looking for candidates. There will be a convention in the city in the next couple of months. And if anyone's interested in running for Public Advocate in November, obviously you would have to start earlier than November, but the election would be in November. Please contact us.
Yeah. So let me try to sell this from a different perspective, which is that the United States of America has national scoped political parties. You know about the Democrats. You know about the Republicans. These are both parties that can get people on the ballot in 50 states. But there is a third party that can do that, and that is the Libertarian Party. The Libertarian Party is the third largest party. It gets people on national ballots. I mean, we are a national scoped
And what did we just
party.
do? What did we just do, Devin? In New York?
And in New York State, thanks to Larry Sharp's very successful campaign, we are now for the first time in history an official party in New York State, which means a bunch of things. One of the things it means is that we get basically automatic ballot access for the next 4 years, which means that we can when I ran for Public Advocate, I had to get 4,000 to 8,000 signatures to get on the ballot. Now, because we have automatic ballot access, we basically, as the party, we get to escort someone onto the ballot as we like in 2019. And then in 2020, we're going to have federal elections where we're going to have 30 plus people, 30 plus candidate slots to fill in a ballot. And then in 2021, we're going to have all the city elections. So that's like 59 candidates.
And the idea is that we don't want to run just, placeholders. We want to use the advantage of not having to petition it so that we can actually campaign. And that's really something that we haven't had the opportunity
to.
And
I mean, as someone who was a candidate, I can tell you, it's really hard when you don't know if you're going to make it on the ballot, when you're working all the time to get on the ballot, to really campaign a lot and to really raise that money, because how embarrassing would it be to raise money and make all of the, and kind of like make a hullabaloo about how you want to be a candidate, and you're taking checks from folks, and then to not get on the ballot. I mean, it's a terrifying prospect. So those days are over for us, at least for the next 4 years. And so the Public Advocate candidate is basically going to be carrying the torch, the torch of liberty, that the possibility of the Libertarian Party becoming a serious party in this city. Because if we have a cool, valid Public Advocate candidate in November 2019, then we're going to be able to attract a lot more interesting, professional, real people to run in 2020 and 2021. And we could absolutely get this party off the ground, get a few candidates actually elected into office, and give the city the third biggest party as an alternative to the Democrats, who, run the city as if it's their own, and the Republicans who are completely irrelevant at this point.
Yep. So that's our pitch. If you're interested, you can contact us on Twitter at libertarianyc, 1N, or go to nyclibertarians.org.
Yeah, and at nyclibertarians.org, you will see a form. You fill out the form. We will all get alerts that you filled out the form, and we are going to run a transparent, open nomination process that will make anyone who's interested in process and integrity proud. And so we're really looking for a cool we're looking for a lot of people to sign up. We're going to hold debates. We're going to have events. We're really going to kind of expose these people to the political scene in New York. And we're going to pick one of them to be our candidate. And the folks who don't get it, we hope they run for, we'll help them run for city council or for, state assembly. There's so many spots coming up, so many spots to fill.
That's our self-paid promotion, our commercial break.
Yeah.
And now we'll get back to the podcast.
Oh yeah, the podcast continues, folks. They were nervous. They're like, oh no, they're gonna stop now. We've got at least 10
the next topic is a personal favorite of mine.
All of these, I'm looking at this agenda, all of these topics I think are personal favorites.
Well, I did help set the agenda.
Yeah, you did.
So the next topic I'd like to talk about is sex worker rights. And if you're not aware, the Libertarian, at least the National Party, is the first national party to embrace completely the right to consensual commercial sex. And we, in New York, we are lucky to have actually a new effort, a new coalition to decriminalize sex work. And that's never happened anywhere. It's a good progressive goal. So there's a lot of organizations who are ready to jump on board. And their whole shtick, it's called DecrimNY. Their whole shtick is to decriminalize, destigmatize, and I forgot the other D.
I don't know.
Anyway,
I'm sure we could come up with some.
I forgot the other D, but it's a very libertarian message, essentially, that it's for decriminalization, that they don't want regulation. They don't want other models that still require either some prohibition, like the quote unquote Nordic model, where people just want to they want to keep prohibiting prostitution, but only attack the buyers and not the sellers. That doesn't work. And then there are also other people who are just plainly against prostitution. And then there are others who want to have these kind of machinations about anti-pimping or certain rules, but they want to
deliver it to big business. I mean,
right.
If you get
but what ends up happening is that you disempower the individual sex workers regardless. So you you still expose them to some dangers. Frankly, we should just treat it as any other business. If they want to choose to organize on a model where they have a dedicated manager or something, where they don't have to think about the business, they don't have to think about how to market or something like that. They could just do their work. That's up to them.
Well, and I think now is a good time to bring up, it's why is this a libertarian issue, right? Is it do libertarians just want everyone doing heroin and going to prostitutes, And it's really hard. People don't, prohibition is a concept. Prohibition was a thing in American history. That was when alcohol was illegal. And what happened when alcohol was illegal? You have the rise of Al Capone. You have the rise of organized crime to an extent that had never existed in America, or probably in the kind of industrialized world, like it did when they decided that they didn't want people drinking, so they made it illegal. So now prohibition was widely recognized and still is widely recognized as a terrible idea when applied to alcohol. And yet we've gone through 60, 70, 80 years of prohibition on everything from drugs like weed to heroin and to sex work. And so so there's this whole narrative around, human trafficking, right? We also have the Robert Kraft, getting caught getting hand jobs I guess, in
A happy
Florida
ending place.
massage parlor. And then the first narrative around that was that, oh, it was a den of like human trafficking. But now they're like, oh, well, actually, this seemed like pretty much just a
It's just a run of the mill normal
run of the
establishment.
mill, like, kind of sex worker, like a massage parlor, quote unquote, that also did, hand jobs and who knows, and probably like,
Well, it's like
normal sex work.
like an erotic massage parlor.
And so, why do we keep? And so, when you make things illegal, it drives activity underground. You create a black market. Black markets are regulated by people with guns and people with arms and people with force. And so, and then you drive, and then it creates a great cloak for human trafficking. So all of these terrible negative externalities that come from things like
But I think it's more.
being
I think it's
illegal
more
and
than that.
humans
I think
being
we can
illegal.
actually offer something more than just the argument against prohibition, because there's a lot of leftist and basically in the sex work activism world, to the extent it exists, it's very leftist, and a lot of these activists actually very much argue your points about prohibition, and they don't like to argue about the destigmatization part. They don't want to normalize prostitution because they see it
Well, who doesn't?
they see it as a that the fact that they think it's bad work. They think it's demeaning. I think a lot of them do think it's demeaning, and that they're just victims of capitalism.
Right. Yeah. This is the left narrative.
Yeah, that they're victims of capitalism because everyone has to do
People are
things.
forced into sex
Everyone has to
work,
do
not
things they don't
by-
want to
not as
do,
human
and they're just the
trafficking.
most marginalized ones that have to do this kind of work. But I think the Libertarian Party can offer a very significant role and a niche because we believe in consensual relations between people. And if people want to have sex, that's fine. We don't think that the government should have anything to do with it. And frankly, we don't think that the government should have anything more to do with it just because money's being exchanged. So
Seems reasonable. I mean, there's certain public health concerns that, I mean, if they're going to get you to get a license to, cut hair, then like maybe they'll get you to get a license under some sensible regulation, quote unquote, to engage in that type of work as well. But
yeah, I mean, plenty of providers already care about that.
yeah, of course, I mean, you
The market tends to
resolve these issues.
Mm-hmm. There are times where you could pay more to not have that, but I predict that you're kind of taking the risk.
Well, let's
kind of an assumption of the risk.
So so the Libertarian Party, right, only national party with a pro-sex worker agenda, and yet the Libertarians are being completely out-organized when it comes to sex workers' rights in New York City, or no?
Well, in New York City, yes, because we just don't have much of a presence.
Just like we don't have enough grassroots people in general, so like just to hit this niche is not.
I mean, I have recently joined the National Sex Worker Rights Caucus in the Libertarian Party, so we are going to work on that.
I went to the national convention. I sat in a meeting of that.
So yeah, I mean, it's definitely in the works, but it might be just a limitation of how much we actually have.
And what do you think? What do you think is driving the left's participation in this now? All of a sudden, or like, have they been participating in this stuff before, or has it recently become trendy because we're getting into kind of a new woke landscape?
Sex workers have been organizing themselves, and that's quite something, particularly in response to SESTA and FOSTA, which are federal laws that were passed to limit the presence on the internet of advertising or marketing for sex work, be it under the guise of saving them from sex trafficking.
Right, and of course the real impact was it made sex work a lot more difficult. A lot of people who were doing like pretty safe quality business from behind their computer when it comes to marketing and connecting with clients.
Being able to advertise from your computer, it was revolutionary. Yeah. There's not much barrier to entry. You can market yourself, particularly on sites like Backpage. It's very easy. You don't need a pimp. You don't have to go outside.
I mean,
you can
going outside
clients.
is clearly such a dangerous proposition.
You can screen clients. Like, you can check their LinkedIn or something. It was extremely important. Now that when Backpage was run out of the internet, basically, and everyone was arrested, you have worldwide, apparently outside the United States, there were countries that were more reliant on Backpage than even we are. So you had all these sex workers who had to go elsewhere to find their clients. It's really just an issue of finding
aren't
clients.
there crime stats coming around now that like murders of women are increasing?
Yeah,
like,
it's
all over
increasing.
The place?
And
you had all
so
of
you have
Hollywood-
to
you
so
had
you
all
have
of,
people
like,
going
quote,
back to their
unquote,
pimps.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way they can get their clients. You have people walking the streets again, which is incredibly dangerous. Which is not. It's
And people are getting murdered because of this.
yeah.
And you had all of this like progressive, quote unquote, Hollywood lining up around to support Sesta Fosta, because they were told this is like a human trafficking thing.
Yeah. Now you have
You know?
Kamala Harris, who is saying, "Oh, I believe in decriminalization," but then she doesn't know what she can't decide what she's talking about. She might be
Right,
talking
this is
about
such
the
a new
Nordic model.
concept to all of
And then
these
she
people, 'cause
defends.
they literally last year
she
they were-
defends being a champion of Sesta Fosta.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Well, this is a dose of reality, I guess, is coming into the, slowly but surely these doses of reality come into the political.
Yeah, and I'm very happy to get
political sphere.
involved on this side against the prohibitionists, and there's plenty of them on the left. So I'm very happy to see this.
Well,
so
once again, this
there's a
is
new
another-
group, DecrimNY, that just came out in New York City to decriminalize. They have they have a bunch of state senators and figures with them, mostly from the left. But I'm very happy about this development, and I can't wait to see where it goes.
Well, it's another place where the Libertarian Party's been on the right side of this issue for like decades.
Yeah.
And now the progressives are catching up, and it would be great for us to get involved and explain the benefits of other types of decriminalization, particularly when it comes to things like heroin, which I know sounds so crazy to people.
Well, do you want to talk about the cannabis legalization effort in New York?
I mean, we can. I mean, I really, looking at this list, what I'd really like to talk about is us building more buildings under any.
All right.
any way
Let's
we
give
can.
cannabis. Okay, so on the agenda we have it's titled YIMBY. If you don't know the term, if you've heard of Not in My Backyard,
Which is the NIMBY.
Which is the NIMBY. There's been a movement starting in California and expanding into New York, among other places, called YIMBY, which is Yes in My Backyard.
And this is really, from my perspective, this is roaring onto the scene. 2 years ago, NIMBYism was discussed. YIMBY, I think I had heard the term a few times, but it was just this little thing happening in San Francisco, which is peak NIMBYism. I mean, San Francisco there's a reason why housing prices are so expensive there. They have not built housing. And so, the YIMBYs rolled up and said, hey, let's actually do the type of organizing NIMBYs have been doing, but for housing. And now, all over the country, the movement has awoken all what I would consider to be really practical people who understand something very basic, which is that housing prices are going to go up if you have people and not enough housing.
Yeah.
And so build more housing.
Right. So specifically in New York, we've had everyone thinks that we have such a glut, so much new construction. It's a complete lie. We've had an increase of about 200,000 units over the last decade, housing units. In the meantime, we've had about 700,000 new jobs and new population.
Mm-hmm. Our housing development rate isn't much better. It's a little bit better than San Francisco per capita.
It looks good
better.
because you travel a lot of the city and you'll see some construction, but in per capita it's nothing. Yeah. It's a trickle. And it's very concentrated, like in Long Island City or Hudson Yards. You have a lot of construction, so it's very concentrated, and I would like to say a shanda, but it's a shame that we have so little construction, and we have this housing crisis that exacerbates everyone's life. People are so rent burdened in this city. The poor, all of the welfare programs are because the poor have to spend 50% of their income on rent, even in rent stabilized units. So,
and then the left, it seems, comes up with every possible idea for how to solve this, except for just building lots more housing quickly and immediately.
Yeah.
So let's just build. Yes, in my backyard, build housing. If you're going to build a new building, set of 4 stories, maybe try 14, right? If you're going to do 14, maybe do 40. You know, I mean, this concept that we just can't, there isn't enough space we're only limited by how high we want to go.
Yeah. And I definitely believe that this is a fundamentally libertarian position. I think there are some
zoning is what's preventing this from happening.
And I think there are some libertarians who think that zoning is kind of a property right.
Right.
That they buy a house or buy an interest with the expectation that there will be some zoning, and that when the city deviates, that it's their property rights that are being taken. But we can't think that way. Zoning was meant to be, I don't agree with zoning, to be fair, but it was meant to be just a gradual thing to make transition orderly, not keeping it the same, but transition.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I think zoning, like with any law, you want it to be simple, easily understood, how you're going to do it. And in New York, like what we saw with this whole Amazon fiasco, which we haven't even gotten into. I mean, we could talk about New York stuff for hours and hours, where it's like, oh, you have to, I mean, Amazon wanted a lot of concessions. They wanted to talk to all these politicians about stuff, but like, we shouldn't have politicians.
Yeah, but fundamentally what they got,
building anything.
Yeah.
Like, it should be clear what's allowed, what's not allowed, so the public understands it, so that the public can change it to suit its will.
But it's also, they keep these things artificially low so that they can get these deals, right? So Amazon's biggest...
The politicians do.
Amazon's biggest thing was that they wanted to use the governor's process to end run the city's process to get a zoning variance or a zoning change. Mm-hmm. So they got that. That was the Cuomo deal. And Gianaris, the senator who Amazon panicked, but when he was put on this committee,
the guy who blew up the deal,
the guy who kind of blew up the deal, with Jimmy Van Bremer, who's the city council person.
Even though the deal was,
the whole
70% of New Yorkers wanted this deal to happen.
Yeah,
so I don't love this deal. I don't like corporate
the whole
welfare,
thing was based on this zoning variance, and so, frankly, I didn't like the deal, but.
Libertarians don't like corporate welfare.
The thing is that we could still have those benefits if we just upzone it, because people want to come to New York, jobs want to come to New York.
Well, and the YIMBY answer is like, Amazon's coming, Amazon's not coming. Who cares? Upzone the neighborhood, build the housing. We need the housing, so just do the upzone. Let's build some housing so rents can go down. There's no other answer.
And I'm happy to say that
how does that create more housing for the human beings that need shelter in the city?
Yeah.
It doesn't. It just gives the people who are already here, lower rent, which is a perfectly fine conceptual thing. But we need more housing because we're not a city.
It's a fundamental truth that people just don't want to admit.
That you just need to build.
We just need to build. It's supply and demand.
Sorry, folks. There's no magic.
And people often say that, okay, well, if you build too much in a neighborhood that's not ready for it, it suddenly becomes gentrified, because if you build, that means that you get this induced demand where, like, oh, we can build luxury housing here, let's do it. And
that's gonna happen.
They're right. They're right.
100,000, 200,000 units.
That's a consequence of the fact that we've been suppressing the market so much.
Yeah,
and we
need to be building. We need 500,000 more units to be able to defray, and then that won't be a problem anymore. But until we get there, like, yes, if you build new housing, new people in the city who are more of the professional class are going to be taking up that housing, and they're going to want dirty matcha espressos, and they're going to want $20 hamburgers and avocado toasts. That's just it's sad, but there's only one way out.
Yep.
And it's to build.
And I sort of like avocado toast. So.
I eat avocado toast almost every morning, but I make it myself. I don't pay for that. I don't pay for that stuff in a restaurant.
I don't have a toaster.
I've got good. I have an extra one if you want. Actually. I really do. All right. Well, I mean, we're over an hour. I don't know how this time flies so fast, but.
I think
as we get better at podcasting, we're gonna have to really keep it under an hour.
Well, we'll see you soon. I think we'll be regular at this thing.
Yeah, at some point we're just gonna become absolute experts, which we're probably not there yet, folks. I think you figured that one
out. But we will just final plug.
Let's do
if you
plug.
Follow us on Twitter at at LibertarianYC. That's Libertarian YC.
Like Y Combinator.
One N. And at nyclibertarians.org.
Yeah.
We also would love it if you're listening to this in New York City.
If you're still listening to this podcast, you absolutely need to show up at a Libertarian Party meeting.
Please.
If you go to nyclibertarians.org, you will be able to see a list of county chapters. Every county's got one except the Bronx until it's going to happen very soon. We're going to get one in the Bronx. All the other counties have, aka boroughs, have chapters. We have meetings once a month. In Brooklyn, we have, I don't need to go through when all the meetings are, but go to nyclibertarians.org. You can see where the meetings are. They're mostly posted on Meetup. Come to a meeting. Think about running for office as a libertarian. We've got the public advocate process beginning to unfold now to select our candidate for November, and then we're going to have the federal elections in 2020. We're going to have the city elections in 2021. We're going to have over 100 spots. It has never been a better time. Get in early on this deal. Libertarian Party in New York City.
Yeah, we hope to see you around.